My sister said, let's get rid of the useless people in the family, and you'll be the first. My parents laughed. The only thing you're good for is the money you bring home. I took a deep breath and said, great. In that case, start packing your bags because this house is mine. My name's Sloan Carver. I'm 31, and I've worked myself into the ground for years. 60-hour weeks as a construction project manager, making around $9,000 a month. 3 years ago, I bought the house I'd always dreamed of. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool, and a backyard that looked straight out of a magazine. Every inch of it came from my sweat, my late nights, and every ounce of energy I had left after work. Then, one afternoon, my parents showed up on my doorstep. My dad, Glenn, was 59 and said he'd retired early because of his back. My mom, Diane, gave me the same tired line. And my younger sister, Marlo, never lasted more than 5 months in any job she got. The rent went up again, Dad said, looking exhausted. We can't afford it anymore. You've got this big place all to yourself. Maybe we could stay here for a bit, just until we find something. I should have said no, but they were family. So I said, 6 months, that's it. They promised. They actually looked relieved, and for a second I felt good about it, like I was finally the daughter who could give back. That feeling didn't last a week. 2 weeks in, I came home to find them lounging by the pool, drinks in hand, while the kitchen looked like a war zone. Dishes stacked in the sink, takeout containers on every counter, the trash overflowing onto the floor. We were going to clean up, Mom said, not moving from her chair. Nobody cleaned up. The utility bills told the story before anyone admitted anything. Electricity went from $190 to $460. Water from $80 to $230. Groceries from $400 to $200 a month, because apparently 3 extra adults eat like they're being timed. I told myself it was temporary. 6 months. I could carry it for 6 months. Then Marlo brought home a guy named Dax. He showed up on a motorcycle that leaked oil onto my driveway, wearing sunglasses indoors, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Within a week, his boxes were in my garage, and his laundry was in my machine. He's between places, Marlo said. Like that explained anything. He'll help out around here. He's good with money stuff. He never helped with anything. He slept until noon, vanished in the afternoons, and came back smelling like other people's cigarettes. What he was good at, I'd learn later, was money, just not the kind that helps. I tried to set limits. I made a chore chart and taped it to the fridge. Marlo drew a mustache on my handwriting and posted a photo of it online with the caption, "When your sister thinks she's our manager." It got 200 likes. I got a notification because we were still connected. I unfollowed her that night. The next week, I came home from a site inspection to find a dozen strangers in my backyard and music loud enough to rattle the patio doors. Marlo and Dax were hosting. My liquor, my pool, my speakers. People I'd never met were tracking mud through my living room and stubbing cigarettes out in a plant pot by the door. "Relax," Marlo yelled over the music when I found her. "It's networking for the brand." At 11, my neighbor knocked. The polite older man from 2 doors down who watered my plants when I traveled. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "Sloan, I don't want trouble," he said, "but this is the 3rd one this month, and the HOAs started a file. I wanted you to hear it from me before you got a letter." 3rd one. I hadn't even known about the first 2. I apologized, shut the party down myself at midnight, and got a citation from the HOA in the mail 4 days later. $300. In my name, of course. 2 days after that, Dax took my car without asking. I'd left the spare key in the kitchen drawer. He brought it back with a fresh dent in the rear panel and an empty tank. "Barely a scratch," he said, not even looking at it. "I'll cover it." He never covered anything. By the end of the first month, my house didn't feel like mine. It felt like a hostel I was paying to clean. So one evening, I sat them down at the dinner table I'd paid for, in the house I owned, and I asked the simplest question. Can everyone chip in something for the bills? Even a little. It's gotten expensive. Dad didn't even pretend to consider it. "We don't have extra money. Marlo, you could get a part-time job. Anything." She didn't look up from her phone. "I'm building my brand. You wouldn't get it." "Dax?" Dax smiled that empty smile. "I've got irons in the fire. Big stuff coming. You'll see." That's when the comments started, and they never really stopped. "Sloan's married to her job," Mom would say to anyone who'd listen. "She doesn't know how to enjoy life. We do. She's always so tense," Marlo added once in front of Dax. "Money's the only thing she's ever been good at. Honestly, it's kind of sad." They laughed. In my kitchen, at my table. I went upstairs and sat in the dark and told myself 6 months. It was almost over. Then the 6 months ended and nobody packed a thing. When I finally asked, "So, when are you all planning to move out?" Dad set down his fork like I'd insulted him. "Why would we? We're comfortable here. We're family, Sloan. You shouldn't be keeping tabs on family." I felt trapped, guilty for wanting my own space, angry for being treated like a stranger in my own home, and underneath it all, a quiet dread, because I was starting to understand they were never going to leave on their own. I just didn't know yet how far they'd go to stay. The slow part was almost worse than what came later. Week after week of small surrenders. I started dreading my own driveway. Some nights I'd sit in my car in the garage for 20 minutes after a long shift, just to have one space where no one needed anything from me. I ate lunch alone at work and called it being busy. I stopped inviting anyone over because the house wasn't mine to offer. A coworker asked if I was all right, said I'd gotten quiet, and I laughed it off and changed the subject. I didn't have the words yet for what it does to you, paying for a home you're not allowed to live in. I told myself I was being dramatic. They were family. Families are messy. This was temporary. I repeated it like a spell, and the spell stopped working a little more every week. The first real escalation came through the mail. A credit card statement I didn't recognize, in my name, with a $1,900 balance. Furniture for the studio. A drone. Something from a website I'd never visited. I confronted Marlo. "Oh, that," she said. "Dax helped me apply. You're the only one with good credit. We were going to tell you. You opened a card in my name. As a household. It's for the house." "Relax. It is not for the house. There's a drone on here. The drone's for content. Content brings money, which helps the house. You're welcome, actually." I closed the card the next morning and paid it off so it wouldn't wreck my score. I told myself that was the line. They'd crossed it, and now they knew I was watching. I was wrong about where the line was. They were just getting started. 2 days later, I came home and my bedroom door wouldn't open all the way. Something heavy was behind it. I pushed inside and stopped cold. My bed was gone. My dresser, my nightstands, the framed prints off the walls. In their place sat my parents' furniture, their bedspread, their photos lined up on my windowsill like they'd lived there for years. My own clothes were in trash bags piled in the hallway. I found them in the kitchen, calm as anything. "We took the master," Dad said before I could even ask. "It's bigger. We're 2 people. You're 1. It just makes more sense. That's my bedroom." "Don't be childish, Sloan," Mom said. "It's a bed. You can take Marlo's old room." Marlo's old room is now a closet for Dax's things. Then the guest room. Honestly, the way you carry on about furniture. Mom shook her head like I was the unreasonable one. I stood in my own kitchen holding the door frame and understood with perfect clarity that there was no bottom to this. There was no amount I could give that would be enough. Every inch I surrendered just became the new floor they stood on to reach for the next thing. I didn't argue. Arguing was what they wanted, because arguing meant I still thought there was a version of this where they'd be reasonable. I dragged my trash bags of clothes to the guest room and shut the door. A week later, I came home from a 14-hour day on a site, and my home office was gone. I worked from home 2 days a week. I had a small office off the hallway, 2 monitors, a standing desk, a locked cabinet with project files and client contracts. It was the one room in the house that was purely mine, purely work, purely off limits. I opened the door and froze. My desk was gone. My monitors were gone. My chair was gone. In their place sat a daybed, a vanity wrapped in fairy lights, and a ring light on a tripod. I found my equipment in the garage, shoved between Dax's boxes. One monitor had a crack spidering across the corner. I went downstairs shaking. "What did you do to my office?" Marlo didn't even look guilty. She was on the new daybed, filming herself. "I needed a studio," she said. "You don't even use that room every day. It just made more sense." "It's not a room. It's where I work." That cabinet had signed contracts in it. "Where is the cabinet?" "Garage somewhere." "It's fine. One of my monitors is cracked." Mom called from the kitchen. "Don't be dramatic, Sloan. It's just a room." "No, it was my office. In my house, with my job inside it." I didn't say another word. I carried my equipment upstairs piece by piece and set it up on the floor of the guest room because that was the only space left that they hadn't taken. I sat on the guest bed that night, surrounded by my own displaced things, and I needed to feel like one thing in my life was still mine. So I opened my laptop and logged into my savings account. Balance, $400. Money I'd been saving for 3 years. An investment property I'd been planning, skipped vacations, packed lunches, every bonus straight into the account. Seeing the number steadied me. It was proof I still had a future they couldn't touch. The next morning, that proof was gone too. I'd left my laptop charging in the living room overnight like I always did. I logged in over coffee to move some money for the mortgage, and the screen didn't make sense. Balance, $41. I refreshed. Same number. I refreshed again. Same. My chest went tight. Transaction history, 4 days ago. A single transfer. $51,800 out to an account I didn't recognize. I stood in my own living room and felt the floor tilt. Who touched my savings account? Dad didn't even look up from the TV. Marlo needed capital. Dax is launching an online boutique. It's a family investment. I heard the words, but they wouldn't land. "You moved $51,000 out of my account." "We didn't move it. We invested it. There's a difference." "I didn't authorize that. Nobody asked me." "You're so selfish about money," Mom said, coming in from the kitchen. "You make good money. You'll earn it back. It took me 3 years to save that, and it'll take you 3 more. So what? Family helps family." Dad finally looked at me. "They'll pay you back when the business takes off." I turned to Marlo. "What business? What does Dax actually sell?" "It's a whole supplier system. Drop shipping? You wouldn't understand it. Show me the website. Show me one order. Show me anything." "I don't owe you a presentation," she snapped. "Dad already approved it. It wasn't a loan and it wasn't an investment," I said, my voice gone very quiet. "It was theft. You logged into my account off my laptop and you stole from me." Dad stood up. "Watch your mouth. We're family. What's yours is ours." "No," I said. "What's mine is mine. I earned every dollar of it." "We gave you a roof when you were a kid," Mom said. "I gave you a roof for a year," I said. "This house is in my name. That account is in my name. None of this is ours. It's mine, and you took it." "Technicalities." Dad waved his hand. "You're thinking like a lawyer instead of a daughter." And right there, in that one dismissive wave, I stopped feeling guilty. I went upstairs and called the bank. "Ma'am," the rep said after I explained, "I'm showing the transfer was authorized using your login, password, and the one-time security code sent to the account. I didn't authorize anything. Someone used my saved login. Does anyone else have access to your device or your information?" I thought about the laptop on the living room charger, the browser that saved every password. Marlo at my old desk every night, filming. Yes, I said. Several people who live with me. There was a pause. That makes this more complicated. If the person who made the transfer lives in your household, we can't simply reverse it as fraud. You'll likely need to file a police report and pursue it legally. I'm sorry. Can I get the money back at all? It depends on where it went and whether it's still there. You'll need legal representation. I'd act quickly. I hung up and sat very still for a long moment. Then I searched property and fraud lawyer near me, and I called the first office with strong reviews. Law office of Renata Voss, said a calm voice. I need an urgent consultation, I said. My family's been living in my house rent-free for over a year. They opened a credit card in my name, took over my office, and 4 days ago, they drained $52,000 out of my savings using my own laptop. I think it's fraud, and I want them out. Can you come in tomorrow at 9? I'll be there. That night, I didn't sleep. I printed every statement. I photographed the cracked monitor in the garage and the credit card application I'd found in Marlo's studio. I screenshotted every text where they admitted moving my things and calling my money theirs. By morning, I had a folder 2 inches thick and a feeling I hadn't had in a year. I was done being the nice one. When I sat across from Renata Voss, she went through the folder slowly, page by page, and the corner of her mouth tightened in a way I'd come to recognize as a good sign. You have a strong case, she said finally. The house is in your name. There's no lease. They pay no rent. That's clean grounds for eviction. The credit card in your name without consent is its own matter, and the transfer, if we can prove unauthorized access, is potentially criminal. How long does it take? For eviction, 30 days if they cooperate, 60 if they fight. For the money, 3 to 6 months, and that part depends entirely on where it went, which is the first thing we trace. How fast can you get me your full account history? Tonight? Good. I'll need a retainer. $1,500. I wrote the check on the spot. My hand didn't even shake. By the end of the meeting, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Control. But I had no idea how ugly things were about to get. I drove straight to work from her office. I'd barely sat down when my boss, Wes Calloway, called me into his. Sloan, he said, closing the door. I got a strange call last night. A woman saying she's your sister. She told me you're having a mental breakdown, that you're unstable, that the family's worried, and that I should keep a close eye on your projects in case you, quote, do something erratic. I went cold. Did she give a name? No, but she knew your last name and your active project list. She knew about the Halverson build. I let out a short, bitter laugh. That's my sister. My family's been living in my house for free, and now that I've hired a lawyer to get them out, they've decided to sabotage me at work. Wes leaned back. Do you need time off? I can shuffle things. No. If I stop working, they win twice. But if she calls again, please log it. Date, time, what she said. My lawyer asked me to build a record. Consider it logged, he said. And Sloan, don't let them break you. You're the best PM I've got, and I've seen breakdowns. This isn't one. That meant more than I let on. The reputation attack didn't stop at my boss. 2 days later, my phone started lighting up with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Marlo had gone public. A long, tearful post about how her cruel, money-obsessed sister was throwing her sick, elderly parents into the street over a misunderstanding about a loan. She'd attached a photo of our parents looking small and frightened on Aunt Marin's couch. It was shared hundreds of times. The comments were a pile-on. People who'd never met me decided I was a monster who valued a bank balance over blood. A few mutual friends messaged me directly. Is this true? How could you? One blocked me without waiting for an answer. My first instinct was to post the bank statements, the transfer, the forensic report, burn the whole lie down in public. I called Renata instead. Do not post anything, she said immediately. Not the statements, not a word. The second you litigate this online, their lawyer screenshots it, and we're explaining your social media in court instead of their fraud. Let them talk. Talk isn't evidence. Receipts are. So I said nothing. I let strangers believe the worst. The only message that landed was from an old college friend, quiet and certain. I don't know the details, she wrote, but I've known you 15 years, and you have never once cared more about money than people. Whatever this is, I'm on your side. I saved that one. It got me through the week. That night, working at the guest desk on the floor, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. We know you hired a lawyer. Big mistake. Blood doesn't sue blood. You'll regret turning on your family. I didn't reply. I screenshotted it and sent it to Renata. She wrote back in under a minute. Save everyone. Do not respond. These build the harassment record, and judges notice them. Keep them coming if they want to keep building our case for us. That weekend, on Renata's instruction, I went to the police station to file the fraud report in person. I sat across from a patient woman with a clipboard and laid out the statements, the transfer, the saved logins, the laptop left in the living room. And the person who made the transfer, she said, reading, lives in your home. Is that right? My sister and her boyfriend, whose account it went to. She set down her pen and gave me the look I was already learning to dread. I'll be honest with you, so you're not surprised later. When it's a household member, these cases get tangled fast. They'll claim they had your permission. It becomes your word against theirs unless you can prove the access was unauthorized. I can prove it, I said. I have a forensic accountant tracing where it went. Something shifted in her face. That helps. That helps a lot, actually. Most people who walk in here have a feeling and a screenshot. You have a map. She picked the pen back up. Let's get every detail down. The more you give me now, the harder it is for them to wriggle later. I gave her 2 hours. I left with a report number and the first solid feeling that this wasn't just me shouting into a wall. The next morning, I sent Renata Renata 6 months of statements before I'd finished my coffee. By that afternoon, she called. The transfer landed in a business account under the name D. Renner. To find out where it went after that, I need a forensic accountant. I work with one, Theo Vance. He's the best I know at following money that's trying to disappear. Can I loop him in? Do it! We met 2 days later in a small conference room near her office. Theo was younger than I expected. Sleeves rolled to the elbow, a laptop covered in stickers, and a stack of printouts already tabbed and color-coded before I'd said a word. You're Sloan, he said, standing to shake my hand. I've been living inside your money for 36 hours. Whoever moved it thinks they're smarter than they are. Tell me you found it. I found where it went. Sit down. This is going to take a second. He turned a printout toward me and traced a line with his pen. Your 51,800 landed here, an account tied to a DAX runner. Within 72 hours, it didn't sit still. It bounced through 2 payment apps, a so-called supplier account and a prepaid card. That's called layering. People do it to make money hard to follow. Did it work? On most people, sure. Not on me. He flipped to the next page. Here's the part that matters. This same DAX runner shows up linked to 2 other small businesses in the last 3 years. Same pattern every time. Money flows in from somebody's savings. The money evaporates. The business dissolves. The people are left holding nothing. Your sister's boyfriend isn't launching a boutique, Sloan. He's running a play he's run before. The room felt very quiet. So my family didn't just borrow my money, I said. They handed it to a professional. They handed it to a con, Theo said, not unkindly. But here's the good news, and there is good news. Money that moves leaves a trail. He was sloppy in one place, and right now, I'm holding the map. For the first time in weeks, someone on my side actually knew the ground better than the people trying to bury me in it. Why are you going this hard on a consult? I asked. Renata booked you for an afternoon. You've clearly done days. He shrugged, a little embarrassed. Honest answer? Most people who get robbed by their own family fold. The guilt gets them. They drop it because going after blood feels worse than losing the money. He nodded at my tabbed folder, identical in spirit to his. You walked in here with the same color-coded system I use and a cracked monitor as Exhibit A. People who don't fold are rare. When I find one, I go to the wall. I almost smiled. It had been a long time since anyone made me feel like the sane one. Renata had to take another call, so Theo and I ended up walking out together, and somehow that turned into coffee at the place on the corner. We were supposed to be reviewing the trace. We spent maybe 10 minutes on it. Can I ask you something off the record? He said, stirring his coffee he wasn't drinking. How does someone like you end up here? You're sharp. You caught the credit card. You kept the receipts. How'd it get this far? Because they were my family, I said. You give family the benefit of the doubt long past the point where you'd give it to anyone else. By the time I stopped doubting, the money was already gone. He nodded slowly, like I'd said something he'd seen 100 times and still hated. That's exactly how it always goes. The con isn't the clever part. The clever part is finding people who'd rather lose money than believe someone they love would take it. Did that happen to you? I asked. You talk like it's personal. He was quiet a moment. My uncle cleaned out my grandmother before she passed, took her savings, her house, told everyone she'd gifted it. Nobody wanted the family fight, so nobody fought it. I was 19. I decided then that if I couldn't undo that one, I'd get good enough to undo other people's. He shrugged. So, personal? Yeah, I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Don't be. It made me very good at my job. He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way Dax's never had, which is lucky for you. We talked for another hour about nothing important. When I finally stood to leave, I realized it was the first time in a year I'd sat somewhere and not braced for the next bad thing. This was nice, I said, almost surprised. It was, he agreed. Let's win your case so we can do it again without a folder on the table. The next day, Renata filed the eviction. 3 days later, the court messenger arrived at my house with the official notice. I'd arranged to leave work early so I could be there for it. I parked in my own driveway and rang my own doorbell. Mom opened the door. Why are you ringing the bell? It's your house. Exactly, I said. That's why I'm here with this gentleman. The messenger stepped up and handed her the envelope. Bold letters across the top. Notice to vacate. 30 calendar days. Mom's face drained of color. What is this? What I should have done a year ago, I said. Dad came out of the living room reading over her shoulder. You can't be serious. You've got 30 days. Leave voluntarily or wait for the court order. Your choice. Marlo appeared at the top of the stairs, Dax a step behind her. You're pathetic, she spat down at me. You'd really put your own parents on the street. And you drained $52,000 from my account and handed it to a man who's done this to 2 other people, I said. So let's not talk about who's pathetic. Dax's expression flickered, just for half a second. But I caught it, and so did he. And we both knew I'd caught it. He came down 2 steps, fists tight. The messenger moved smoothly between us. Sir, he said, if you make contact with her, I call the police right now. And that goes in the record too. Dax stopped, backed up, muttered something I didn't bother to hear. Mom started crying. How can you do this to your own parents? We're family. Family respects boundaries, I said. You used me, and then you stole from me, and then you tried to get me fired. That's not family. That's a parasite that calls itself one. Dad jabbed a finger at me. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me food and a roof until I was 18. That's the baseline for having a kid. I gave you free housing for a year, paid your bills, and watched you hand a stranger my savings. We are not even, and we are not family anymore. We're a landlord and 3 tenants who have 30 days. He snatched the papers out of the messenger's hand. We'll fight this in court, then spend money you don't have on a lawyer. offer, I said. You'll lose. That night, I checked into a hotel 10 minutes from the office. A small, clean room. A door that locked with only my key. For the first time in over a year, I slept the whole night through. The next morning, while I was eating breakfast downstairs, Renata called. Your family hired an attorney. They've requested mediation. What are they offering? To start paying $2,500 a month in rent and stay another 6 months while they, quote, get back on their feet. No, I'm obligated to tell you that on paper, it's not an unreasonable offer. A mediator might lean on you to take it. I spent a year living like a prisoner in my own house, I said. I slept on a guest room floor next to my own stolen office furniture. I am not renting my house to the people who robbed me so they can rob me slower. The answer is no. Understood, Renata said, and I could hear something like respect. We proceed with the eviction. Their lawyer still pushed for a mediation session, and the court scheduled one I was required to attend. Renata warned me it would be theater. She was right. We sat in a beige room with a neutral mediator at the head of the table. My parents on one side, Marlo beside them, Dax conveniently absent, Renata and me on the other. My mother cried before anyone spoke. My father held her hand and stared at the table like a man at a funeral. My clients are willing to be generous, their lawyer began. They'll begin paying market rent, sign a 6-month lease, and consider the past financial matter a family loan to be repaid on a schedule. All they ask is to not be made homeless by their own daughter. The mediator turned to me. Ms. Carver, that's a substantial offer. Would you like to respond? I looked at my parents, then at Marlo, who was already half smiling like the deal was done. There was no loan, I said evenly. There was a transfer I never authorized, into an account my sister co-owns with a man under criminal investigation in another county. I'm not interested in renting my house to the people who emptied it. The answer is no. My mother's crying hitched up a register. Sloan, please. We're your parents. Then you'll understand I learned about consequences from somewhere, I said. Their lawyer tried again. Surely there's a number that works. Name it. There isn't a number, I said. I don't want their money. I want them out. And I want my savings back. And one of those things is already in a judge's hands. Marlo's smile finally dropped. You'd really send your own sister to prison to prove a point. I'm not sending you anywhere, I said. You put your name on the account. The district attorney is doing the rest. That's not my point to prove. It's yours to answer for. The mediator looked between us and quietly closed her folder. I don't think we have an agreement here. No, I said, standing. We don't. I walked out, and for the first time, their performance hadn't moved me an inch. 2 days later, she called again, and her voice was tighter. They filed a formal response. They're claiming you invited them to live there permanently, that they're long-term residents, and that you abandoned the property when you moved to the hotel. They're arguing tenancy rights. That's a complete lie. I know, but the burden flips a little. I need to prove beyond any doubt that you alone carried that house and never surrendered it. Every bill, every payment, every document, all in your name. Can you pull it together? I'll have it tonight. I spent that entire night on the hotel bed surrounded by paper, utility bills, mortgage statements, property tax records, the pool service contract, the lawn company invoices, the receipt for the new roof I'd paid for 2 years earlier, the homeowner's insurance, the security system, the appliance warranties, every single thing in my name, every single charge paid from my account, not one document with their names anywhere. I scanned all of it and sent it to Renata at 2 a.m. Her reply came an hour later. This is airtight. They don't have a leg to stand on. Let them keep arguing. Every filing they make, we answer with a stack of receipts. They are funding our win. But the next pressure didn't come through the court. It came through family. I walked out of a site meeting 2 days later and found my Aunt Marin leaning against my truck, my dad's older sister, the family peacemaker, which in our family always meant the family enabler. We need to talk, she said. I'm working, Aunt Marin. Sloan, your parents are sleeping on my couch. Your mother cries every single day. This isn't you. You were always the responsible one, the kind one. I was always the one who paid, I said. There's a difference, and I'm just now learning it. They made mistakes, but they're your parents. You can't put your own blood out on the street over money. They drained my life savings and gave it to a con artist. My sister opened a credit card in my name. They called my boss to try to get me fired. This isn't about money, Aunt Marin. It's about the fact that they'll burn me to the ground and call it love. She crossed her arms. Marlo says you've turned cold, hard. Marlo says a lot of things. She also signed her name to a fraud account, which she'll find out about soon enough. I opened my truck door. If protecting myself from people who rob me makes me cold, then fine. I'm cold. I'd rather be cold and safe than warm and bankrupt. She stared at me a long moment, and something in her face shifted, like she was seeing me for the first time. You're harder than I remember, she said quietly. I learned from the best, I said, and I drove away. I thought that would be the last of the personal appeals. It wasn't. 3 days later, Marlo showed up at the hotel. I have no idea how she found me. Aunt Marin probably, or she followed my routine. She was waiting in the lobby when I came down for coffee, and for a second she almost looked like my sister again instead of a stranger who'd robbed me. 5 minutes, she said. Please. I should have walked away. Instead, I sat across from her in the lobby, near the front desk, in public, where she couldn't make a scene. You have to drop this, she said. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Mom won't eat. Aunt Marin's threatening to put them out too. We have nowhere to go. You had somewhere to go, I said. My house, for a year. Free. Sloan, her eyes filled, right on cue. I'm your sister. Doesn't that mean anything? It used to mean everything, I said. Then you sat at my old desk every night and logged into my laptop and moved $51,000 to your boyfriend. So tell me what it's supposed to mean now. That was was Dax's idea. He said it was an investment. He said you'd thank us when it paid off. And you believed him over your own sister. That tells me everything. She switched tactics, the tears drying fast. If you keep going with this, you'll ruin the family. Forever. Is your precious money worth that? It was never about the money, Marlo, I said, and I stood up. It's about the fact that not one of you said sorry. You came here to make me drop charges. Not to apologize, not once. She opened her mouth, and I realized she genuinely couldn't find the word. It wasn't in her. 5 minutes are up, I said, and I left her sitting there. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and a little sad, and underneath it, finally, free. My father made his own attempt the next afternoon. He showed up at my job site, of all places, standing at the edge of the lot in his good shirt while my crew pretended not to watch. You came to my work, I said, walking over before he could get closer to the trailer. You won't take my calls. What choice did I leave myself? He spread his hands. Sloan, man to man, father to daughter, whatever you want to call it. This has gone far enough. Drop the criminal part. Keep the house, fine, we'll go. But don't put your sister in front of a judge. She's your blood. She put my $52,000 in front of a con man, I said. Where was the blood then? His voice dropped, and the warmth went with it. You think you'll feel good about this? When your mother can't sleep and your sister has a record, you'll carry that. A daughter who did that to her family. People will know what you are. There it was. The same move every time. Wrap a threat in concern and call it love. People already think they know what I am, I said. My sister made sure of that online. I stopped living for their opinion the day I found my account empty. I stepped back. You need to leave my job site. If you come here again, I'll have you trespassed. And that goes in the file too. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was waiting for the old Sloan to flinch and fold. She didn't show up. She wasn't there anymore. He turned and walked to his car without another word. That afternoon, the spite started. A neighbor I'd kept on good terms with texted me a photo. My family, loading a rented van in my driveway, my flat screen, my patio furniture, the good kitchen appliances I'd bought. I drove over. By the time I got there, the van was gone, but the damage wasn't. Deep scratches gouged into the hardwood floors where they'd dragged furniture without lifting it. The back door left wide open, the pool pump running dry, burning itself out because someone had turned it on and walked away. I stood in the wreckage of the house I'd built, and I didn't cry. I photographed every scratch, every empty space where my things had been, the dead pump, the open door. I sent it all to Renata. Theft of fixtures and willful property damage, she said. I'm adding it to the complaint. Sloan, I've done this 20 years. I've rarely had a defendant hand me this much evidence against themselves. They cannot stop helping us. But the break that ended it didn't come from Renata. It came from Theo, late that night, his voice fast and electric. Sloan, I traced the rest of it, all of it. Dax moved your money into an account he also used for one of his earlier marks. A woman 2 counties over who already filed a police report 8 months ago. Same scheme, same supplier story, same disappearing boutique. I cross-referenced the dates and the routing. It's identical. So he's already being investigated. He's already under active investigation, which means your money isn't just a civil headache anymore. It's evidence in a criminal fraud case. I packaged everything, every transfer, every date, every link, and sent it to Renata and to the detective on the existing case. And Marlo? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. He was quiet for a second. Her name is on the account too, Sloan. She co-opened it with him. Legally, that doesn't make her a witness. It makes her a participant. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed, the phone warm against my ear, and stared at the wall. You okay? Theo asked. I don't know, I said. I think I'm relieved, and I think that makes me a terrible sister. It doesn't, he said gently. You didn't put her name on that account. She did. You didn't move the money. She helped. Everything that's coming for her, she built with her own hands. You just stopped paying to clean it up. That's not betrayal. That's the first sane thing anyone in your family has done in years. We talked for another hour after that, not about the case at all, about where he grew up and the worst client he ever caught, and the fact that we'd both eaten cereal for dinner more nights that month than either of us wanted to admit. It was the first easy conversation I'd had since my parents arrived on my doorstep. Day 23 of the eviction notice, Renata called with the news that turned the whole thing. The detective got a freeze order on Dax Renner's accounts. They recovered $38,000 of your $52,000. The rest he'd already burned through, and you may never see it. But here's what matters more than the money. With the freeze and the existing case, the district attorney is filing fraud charges against Dax and against Marlo as a named co-owner of the account. 38 back, I said slowly. 38 back. And criminal charges doing the heavy lifting a civil suit never could. I have been doing this for 2 decades, Sloan. The pieces almost never fall this cleanly. You did everything right. You documented, you didn't react, you didn't take the bait. This is the payoff for that. And the eviction? Hearing is in 7 days. Day 30. They have a fabricated abandonment claim and a stack of suitcases. We have the deed, every bill in your name, the harassment texts, the call to your employer, the property damage, and a forensic report. The judge will sign it. It's not a question of if. The night before the hearing, Theo showed up at the hotel with takeout and a folder. Final numbers, he said, sliding it across the little table. Every transfer, every date, mapped clean. If their lawyer tries anything tomorrow, Renata reaches into this and ends it. You drove all the way out here for that. I drove all the way out here, he said, because I wanted to see your face the night before you get your life back. The folder's just my excuse. We ended up sitting on the floor with our backs against the bed because the table was buried in paper. paper. Can I ask you something? He said. After tomorrow, they're gone. The money's mostly back. It's all over. What do you actually want? I thought about it longer than I expected to. Quiet, I said finally. A house that's mine. One morning where nobody's already taken something from me before I've even opened my eyes. He nodded slowly. That's a good list. Short, honest. He looked at me. I'd like to be around for some of those mornings. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow's yours. But after. I didn't answer right away. I just let myself, for the first time in a year, want something good instead of bracing for the next thing to be taken. After, I said. I'd like that. Before he left, he stopped at the door. You're going to win tomorrow, and you're going to be okay long after. How do you know? Because I've watched a lot of people go through the worst version of this, he said. Most of them break. You didn't. You sharpened. I didn't sleep that night either, but it wasn't dread keeping me up. It was the feeling right before a breath you've held for a year finally gets to come out. Day 30. The hearing was short, and it was brutal, and every brutal piece of it landed on the right side of the room. Renata laid the file out like a surgeon. House in my name. Deed dated 3 years back. Every utility, every tax bill, every service contract paid from my account, never theirs. The credit card opened in my name without consent, closed and proven. The unauthorized transfer. The $38,000 recovered under a criminal freeze. The harassment texts, read into the record one after another. The call to my employer. The photographs of gouged floors and a burned-out pump, and the empty spaces where my appliances had been. Their lawyer started with the abandonment argument, and Renata answered it with a hotel folio dated the night they served me harassment texts, plus every bill I'd kept paying from the hotel. The argument collapsed in under 2 minutes. He pivoted to the money, calling it a family arrangement gone sour. Renata read the harassment texts into the record one by one, in a flat, even voice that made them sound exactly as ugly as they were. Big mistake. Blood doesn't sue blood. You'll regret turning on your family. Then she entered Theo's forensic report, walked the judge through the layering, the prepaid card, the 2 prior victims, the active criminal case in the next county. The room got very quiet. My father's jaw worked like he wanted to object to reality itself. My mother stopped performing tears halfway through because no one was looking at her. Their lawyer set down his pen. Your Honor, Renata finished. My client gave these people a home for a year. They repaid her by emptying her savings into a fraud account, opening credit in her name, damaging her property, and contacting her employer to jeopardize her job. She is not asking for damages today. She is asking only to have her own house back. He stopped trying after that. There was nothing left to say. The judge granted the eviction in full, effective immediately, and noted on the record that the criminal matter would proceed separately and was not his to weigh, but was, in his words, deeply relevant to the character of the claims he'd just heard. When we walked out into the hallway, my father stepped into my path. Sloan, think about what you're doing. This destroys us. You destroyed yourselves, I said. I just finally stopped paying the bill for it. Your sister could go to prison. My sister put her name on a fraud account and helped drain her own sister's savings. I didn't sign it. She did. Every consequence coming for her, she chose. My mother grabbed my arm, her face crumpling. Please, we have nowhere to go. We're your parents. I gently took my arm back. You had a daughter who gave you a home for a year and everything she had, I said. You chose a con man and a lie over her. I hope it was worth it. It's not my problem to carry anymore. They didn't follow me out of the building. That afternoon, the court officer met me at the house with Renata and Theo. Marlo and Dax were already gone, vanished the moment the charges came down like smoke. Only my parents were left inside, 3 battered suitcases between them. You have 2 hours to gather essentials, the officer told them. Everything else will be cataloged and stored at your expense. 2 hours? Mom cried. We lived here a year. That's the standard, he said, not unkindly and not moving. I watched them move through my house one last time. My father went room to room, slower than I'd ever seen him, like he was still looking for the argument that would undo this. There wasn't one. My mother filled a suitcase with things that weren't hers, and the officer quietly made her put half of it back. She tried, near the end, to corner me by the stairs. After everything we did for you, she started, and I just looked at her until the sentence ran out of road. We both knew the ledger. We both knew which way it ran. You can take what's yours, I said, not what's mine. The officer will tell you the difference if you can't. It was the first time in my life I'd said something to my mother and watched her have absolutely nothing to say back. Renata stepped close to me and lowered her voice. You can still slow this down if any part of you wants to. Once those locks change, it's done. Are you certain? I looked at the house, the pool I'd dreamed about, the kitchen window, the office they'd gutted into a studio, the bedroom they'd taken, the savings they'd handed to a stranger, the scratches in my floors that would never fully sand out. I'm certain, I said. Finish it. An hour and a half later, my parents walked out the front door with their suitcases. Where will you go? I asked. Not because I owed them an exit, because some small, stubborn part of me needed to know they wouldn't sleep in the street even after everything. Marin's, Dad said stiffly, not meeting my eyes. At least she still understands family. She knows what you did, I said. All of it. If she takes you in anyway, that's her choice to make. It stopped being my burden the day you logged into my laptop. They got into a cab. My mother looked back once, through the rear window, the way she always did when she wanted me to feel it. I didn't look away, and I didn't soften, and I didn't chase the guilt that used to come on command. The cab pulled out of my driveway and turned the corner and was gone. The officer changed the locks on the front and back doors, tested both, and pressed the new keys into my palm. Property's legally back in your sole custody, he said. It's yours doors, Ms. Carver. Nobody comes through these doors again unless you let them." Then he left. Then Renata left, with a hand on my shoulder and a quiet, "You earned every inch of this." And then it was just Theo and me, and a house that for the first time in a year held no one who hadn't earned the right to stand in it. I walked through every room, the gutted office where Marlowe's fairy lights still hung crooked on the wall, the stripped master bedroom, the scratched hardwood catching the late light, the dead pool pump out back. Tomorrow it would all be work and money and repairs. Tonight it was just quiet, and the quiet wasn't tense anymore. It wasn't waiting to be broken by a demand or a complaint or a hand sliding into my account while I slept. The quiet was clean. It was mine. I sat down on the bare living room floor, the new keys still warm in my fist, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a year. Theo sat down beside me, not too close, just there. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like the house finally exhaled," I said. He huffed a soft laugh. 38,000 recovered. Charges filed. Locks changed. They took a year off your life and walked out with 3 suitcases and a criminal case. By any math I know, you won. I looked around the empty room. My empty room. In my house. With my name on the deed and my keys in my hand, and not one person left inside who saw me as a wallet with a pulse. "They told me," I said slowly, "that I was only good for the money I brought home." Theo waited. I closed my hand tighter around the keys. Turns out I was even better at keeping it.